Hey everybody, welcome to DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen. With me as always is my brother Brennan. Together we make movies with DBS Films. In today's episode, we're going to part 2 of why your first indie feature film is most likely to be bad. As we've mentioned before, being bad is all part of the process, and it is super critical milestones. But as an indie filmmaker, it is something that we want to try and get you prepped for and prepared for because it is most likely going to be the case. As always, be sure to take a look at our Discord channel online. We make movies for our fans, with our fans, so if everyone be part of the movie making process, that is the place to be. And Horror in the Forest is our newest feature film, which could be out by the time you're listening to this. Rental and review means the world to us. So, as we kind of mentioned in the first episode, it's really kind of a mindset thing in the sense that a lot of people underestimate just how difficult, just how challenging filmmaking can be. And because of that and those expectations you put in your own head, you can typically be disappointed in the final product. Also, we mentioned how, unlike other arts, indie filmmaking and filmmaking in general tends to be the one that everyone feels like is so easily reproducible, and yet it actually is a lot more challenging than a lot of other art forms in there because there is a whole lot of people involved in that process. So I think I wanted to hop right into this and kind of talk about the two reasons that I think your first feature film and just filmmaking in general is going to be really tough for you at first and a lot harder than you really think. And I think the first one's going to be limited experience. And then the second part is going to be picking too grand of an idea. I think those two things are kind of a 1-2 punch and kind of knocking out an indie filmmaker. And I think the first thing is limited experience. I think even we saw this for the first Hateful Eight. As you mentioned, we would hire out production teams for videography, sound, editing, all of these things, because we're like, hey, we don't know any of this stuff. Let's hire experts for this. And while they all did a fantastic job, I think one of the core base things in life is if you haven't done the task yourself, you simply have no clue what is possible or not possible. Again, we've had times where it's like, hey, is this going to edit together? Is this going to cut right? And in their opinion, they believe so, or, they thought that this would happen. And again, they're still learning too. So everyone under our umbrella is our responsibility. And, when you end up in the editing room, you realize that it doesn't. And I'll tell you exactly how something's not going to cut together when you've experienced it not cutting together and you understand that you don't have that shot. And then the second one is just people pick way too big of a concept. They pick a sci-fi, they want special effects, they think they're making this grand story when it really could be a contained one. I think that's kind of realistically, if you take a look at the Hateful Eight, that's kind of, you can see basically those two themes back and forth when it comes to what are kind of causing a lot of the issues on set for us.
Yeah, I think you have to have experience, but it has to be uploaded footage experience. I think a lot of filmmakers will understand how to work a camera. They will understand how to get good sound, or they'll do this stuff for shorts. And a feature is such a different beast. You're moving so quickly that you really kind of have to, improvise and adapt and overcome on set so many times that you have to have that experience. And it's one thing to understand on a technical level how to get the settings correct in a camera, how to make sure you're shooting in the right format, how to make sure your ISO is correct, how to make sure your aperture is correct, all this stuff. But there's a huge difference between doing that and getting good shots. And getting good shots is from doing this as many times as possible, getting hours of uploaded footage so that you can kind of sit back and look at it and say, all right, I like this shot. Let's keep doing this. I don't like this shot. Let's, not do this. And I think that was the biggest part with, the Hateful Eight, where the progress from movie to movie just wasn't there. And I thought at points we got worse. I think that if you kind of, we've segmented the movies before, but if you kind of look at, after we did the found footage movies of Murder House and Into the Forest, and we did Morgan Estate and Devil in the Room, the progress from those to, the Morgan Estate and the Devil in the Room is almost backwards. I do think that Devil in the Room, we did take a step back, but that was just, we had a good technical crew, but just getting better was not there. I don't think those movies were better on a technical level. I remember the editor that I was working with was saying that the footage was just, there's a lot of issues with the footage. And then I didn't really believe him. And then when we went back and started editing these things ourselves, it was true. Like we had to work around a lot of stuff. But you have to get experience, and the only way to get experience is to film it and then upload it and then learn from that. If you're not uploading things, if you're just kind of messing around with your friends, if you're not finishing projects, I don't count that as experience, because you really got to sit down, look at your stuff, make the decisions to get this final product uploaded. And at that point, you learn from it. If everything's in post and you're like, oh, that shot, I can always make it better, I could do it differently. I don't think you're actually going to learn at that, because now it's like when I sit down and I edit a movie, I'm like, dang, that shot is horrible. Don't ever do that again. That sequence is horrible. Don't ever do that again. And that's really, I think, where the rubber meets the road as far as how you get better at something.
Yeah, I really think that is the case. Is again, having that final uploaded product is such a massive difference. And I think again, going back to the first one, highlighting the mindset of this, I'm curious, like looking back at the Hateful Eight, well, again, each one of them was very valuable and critical. Like just reviewing the overall plots that we picked, I mean, besides the found footage ones, I don't really know if there's another plot that I would like really tackle. Yeah, Morgan Estate, it's probably more doable in that sense. But why even? I feel like you can execute on a much better, smaller budget idea. So I think the next thing I want to talk about is within like one of the biggest things that I feel like I look to sniff out right away with an indie filmmaker is just what's the synopsis of your idea? Because they'll just tell you an idea that's going to be a 200, 300, 400, $500 million movie right off the bat. And if that's the issue, it is way easier for you to change your concept in your movie than it is to execute said movie. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I see indie filmmakers shooting themselves in the foot. If you can actually understand that you are a beginner and that this is a learning experience, I feel like you will take a much safer concept to execute on. We talk about found footage all the time, and I highly recommend it specifically for indie filmmakers because it really focuses on forcing you to capture edits or forcing you to capture the cuts versus making them edit in post and, relying on, oh, we'll edit together. But I think it just also can kind of set you up for an easier concept. So do you want to talk about, how that the first concepts are usually very difficult ones? I mean, again, The Invited, I love that movie. It's an absolutely fantastic movie. Should that have been our second movie that we ever made? No, and no way. I'm so surprised would you greenlight The Invited now at our budget level is basically the big question.
Yeah, I think most indie films run into a lot of trouble just based on concept. I think they're in a lot of trouble even before they get started. There's just so many movies that have just so many wild concepts, because it comes back to the whole thing we talked about in the last episode. You think you see it done for $1 million. You see, all these big movies. If you're not actually watching indie movies, you think that you could pull this off. So that's what we did with The Invited. I watched Eyes Wide Shut. I've watched a whole bunch of cult movies. I was like, we could do this. It's just a whole bunch of people in a house. What's so hard about that? It's impossible to do at a very low budget. And I see this all the time with indie films. They just take crazy concepts and they're just trying to do it. Concepts that need $5-10 million to get them to be able to tell that story. You have aliens, you have special effects, you have portals, you have all this crazy stuff. And it's just impossible. It's impossible to make that a good story. And so I think a lot of, filmmakers fall into this trap immediately of just having a concept that's just not shootable. It's just impossible on the budget that you're going to do on your skill level to shoot it. And you're going to be in trouble right off the bat. And it's always fun. I love these movies because I'm like, oh boy, here we go. They're trying to make a mansion with, 50 people in it. And then aliens come up and there's special effects. I'm like, this is gonna be wild. And then you watch it and it's wild, and it's wild, not in a good way. But you kind of have to look at what you have, the resources you have, and make it as, as low budget as you possibly can. There's a reason why we shoot a lot of our stuff in the woods. The woods are cheap. The woods look scary. And, it's easy to shoot stuff in the woods. One location, the cabin, Girl in Cabin 13, one location, Murder House, one location, Forest of Death, woods, and one location. Bigfoot was just woods. And all that stuff is, the woods are, we pay for the properties, but in some cases, if you live up north, you could probably get woods for free. So you kind of have to look at that kind of stuff. And each time you move locations also takes a ton of time because you have to move equipment, you have to move actors, you have to transport people. It takes a lot of time to do all this stuff. But I do think the number one downfall for most indie films is it's just a concept that should never have been greenlit. You know, if I look back at all the movies that I've done from the Hateful Eight, I probably greenlight right now Morgan Estate, but Morgan Estate would probably be our highest budget movie if I were to actually tackle that again. And probably Whitlow would be the other one that I would greenlight. And Whitlow would need a massive budget. It would probably need close to six figures to get that movie done, because the best part of that movie is the ending. You need a lot of extras. You're gonna need a lot of special effects. You're gonna need a specific location, which is a haunted house. So it's like, all right, I can spend six figures on Whitlow House, or I can make 2 to 3 movies in the woods in one location that have a very good chance of being better than the Whitlow House. So it's like, what you gonna do? You know, what's your decision? So it's very hard for me to, you know, remake Whitlow. We will remake Whitlow at some point, but it's difficult for me to greenlight that when there's a lot of other movies that I can make, that I could get better, that I could tell a story that fits our budget and probably have a better movie than you know, going back and revisiting Whitlow or something that requires just that much more of a budget constraint.
I think that's really the case that I think we're trying to highlight here is like a lot of times you'll see filmmakers where like they're like, oh, this is my single idea. And just in itself, I think that's a very, very toxic mindset to have, where it's like, I only have one idea here. I mean, again, ideas and writing are probably the easiest, most affordable things that you can do. So you should be able to generate more and more ideas just for the sake of it. I mean, we have hundreds of ideas that would be good horror movies. We're just kind of checking off which ones fit the budget. But I think the next thing I really want to talk about is, if you're viewing these as progression to not only get better, it allows you to have so many multiple benefits. So number one, you can focus on your improvement, which is, again, our biggest goal. You always hear us saying that we want to improve movie over movie. That's the biggest thing. And I will say we have been executing on that very, very well. The Bigfoot movie is a massive step up. You know, Cold Grave, just all of the features, as we're kind of getting better, we are learning more. So one, you can focus on improving. Two, smaller budget means you're most likely to make your money back. And hey, that is very, very important to having a long-term successful business, is having a path to profitability. So if you keep that budget very low, then you'll be able to learn from it. And then the last thing is, these can test your concepts. I mean, the big thing for us, as we mentioned, is, yeah, we'd never, you know, like I said, Morgan Estate, Whitlow would probably not get greenlit till we have a budget. But when we do have a budget, guess what? We have a concept that we know we can execute on because we've done the bare bones version of it. So I think if you're a filmmaker, if you can keep all of this in mind, you can make a low budget movie that you will learn from. You'll learn the process because it's a smaller scale movie. You won't be overwhelmed. You can focus in on improving on certain things. And usually when we approach our movies, we typically have 1 to 2 things that we're highly focused on improving on. So you can really laser focus in on different areas. The next thing is your budget will be very low. So that means you can make your money back. And the third thing is you can actually test a concept. So that is the benefit of basically understanding that, you know, this is not your magnus opus. This is not going to define your career as a filmmaker. This is just another stepping stone in that filmmaking process.
Yeah, and it's especially as a first-time filmmaker, you don't realize how much things can go wrong. Even just getting a completed movie, when you hand it off to distribution, you can have a bad distribution contract. There could be issues with the platform. Our last launch, you know, showed up on Tubi way before it should have showed up on Tubi. And if that was a huge movie, that would have been a massive L for us, and it would have really been hard to get our money back. But the thing was we made Force of Death relatively cheaply, so it didn't really bother me. If one movie flops, it doesn't bother me. We just move on to the next one. If you have all your eggs in one basket, and you know you have some kind of glitch or there's some kind of issue, and you're going to be really stressed out. Like it's going to be very difficult. I think you just got to kind of look at these things. I think Kel brought up a really good point as far as looking at trying to isolate one thing to get better at with each movie. And this is something that I've tried to do with all the last movies, the last 4 or 5, and it's really been beneficial. With Bigfoot, it was making sure we really focus on a good intro and a really good ending. And I thought we did a really good job with that. With Roger Project, it was just making sure the pacing is as perfect as we possibly can get it. We've really honed in on pacing because it's a one-person movie, so it could slow down. And I thought we did a really good job with the Roger Project. It flows really, really well. It develops the lore really well. And I thought we nailed that. And with Horror in the Forest, it was just making sure we get that tension, the dread, the elevated horror kind of feel that I think our movies before that were kind of lacking. And I thought we did a good job of learning that and then applying to the Bigfoot project as well. But when you can kind of do this kind of stuff and say, look, I'm going to make this movie cheap. We're going to test it out. And all I'm trying to do is get a really good intro scene on here. And if I can get that done, I don't really care, whether or not this becomes a huge blockbuster. If it sells really well, I'm just focused on getting better at this one filmmaking aspect. I think it's a healthier mindset. And I think it allows you to learn, get better, and then move on to the next project. And that's just something that we've been doing moving forward. I think it's been really beneficial because it does give extra eyeballs on those certain things that have maybe been lacking for us in the past. But now, as we're like, all right, look, we got a good intro. Now we understand how to do intros. And we have a good climax. Now we know how to do climaxes, and all this stuff that we're learning, we take on to the next project, and it becomes exponentially better.
It really is the case. And I think the last thing I really, want to highlight is it becomes your strongest asset is what is your biggest liability, which is your inexperience, becomes your strongest asset as a filmmaker. And what's interesting in filmmaking, as you mentioned, is it's always a bunch of little tiny decisions. I mean, again, moving from boom mics to lav mics, our whole process for lighting a scene is completely different than when we first started. We get faster working with actors, knowing how to get information with them, pre-production. There's a whole laundry list of things that it would be nearly impossible for us to just be able to check off all of the information that we have. But because we've done it so many times, it becomes ingrained in you. And I think that's the biggest thing is the biggest benefit that we have is that we have, filmed 14 features. We have 12 of them. The 12th one's being released now. We had 2 more in post. We're getting ready for another one, and you get better on each and every one, and your community gets bigger. So really, what a lot of filmmakers are missing is this whole process, in the sense that, again, a lot of the mindset out there is you'll make something, you'll go to a festival, you'll get picked up, Hollywood will take you, you're directing the next Marvel. Congratulations, you've done it. And I mean, while that path does exist, it's very, very lucky. And those people that are getting are also, they've probably been working for a long time, and they probably do have a lot more experience than it looks like, even if they are a first-time film director. But as a filmmaker, the more movies you make, the better you are as a filmmaker. I would say that is going to be my mindset. Now, there are going to be different cases out there, but it is really something where every single time you complete a project, there are so many little things that pop up. And I think it's something we look for with other indie filmmakers, is that consistency element to it. So as you're making these movies, as you're learning, you are developing the strongest filmmaking muscle, and it gets easier. It's never been easier for us to make a movie now. The sets have gone from, pure chaos to controlled chaos, is what I'd like to say. And it's only getting better. And again, the nice part here is we understand how to make a movie at a lower budget range. So the easy part's scaling up the budget. And if you can't make a movie at a lower budget, throwing more money at it is most likely not what's going to fix that movie.
Yeah, and I've seen from my experience the movies where I've thrown more money at it, the higher budget movies are worse than the lower budget movies. And I think this is a big lesson that I think a lot of filmmakers need to understand. Money does not solve filmmaking problems. You can't just throw money and get a better story. It doesn't work like that. I think money is best spent if you have to do pickups and you have to actually get scenes done in order to actually get an uploaded movie. But for the most part, I do not believe that money will make your movie any better. Money will not make your concept better. Money is just not going to really help you out. And I think there's 2 reasons for that, because money will not fix a story that you shouldn't have started in the first place. And number 2 if you're a first time filmmaker, you don't know how to properly allocate this money to where it needs to go. Okay. So right now, if I were to say, here, Brendan, let's scale, let's double our budget, where would you put your money? And I would just say extra days. I would have extra days. I would probably shoot 10 days and have 2 pickup days at the end of the shoot. So we could do 10 days on, take our time, really kind of get the concept down, edit the whole movie, then take 2 days to fill in the blanks and pick up, have the smaller shots that we need, the inserts, and then fix anything that we need to fix. And I wouldn't buy extra equipment. I wouldn't really do anything else other than give us just a little bit more time. That being said, I don't think it's going to make a better movie if I have those extra days. I think with the movies and the concepts that we do now in our 8 days are really, really solid. There are smaller little things in there, but they're not make or break. And especially after seeing the Roger Project, which I think we got done in like 5 or 6 days, and how coherent that movie is. The only, pickup shots that we needed was the intro title sequence. The rest of it is really solid. And I don't think extra days would have made that movie any better than it is already. So I would probably say, maybe getting a better location, but it's not going to make a good location is not going to take one idea and make it that much better than another idea. I think it comes down to a lot of other things, and I just don't think money's going to really help you. Money's not going to save you. So when you're kind of looking at this stuff from a budgetary aspect, throwing money is in most times just going to kind of pour gasoline on a fire if you have something that you shouldn't be shooting in the first place.
Exactly that. I mean, it really is the case where, a lot of times you'll see a lot of indie filmmakers will complain that, oh, the hardest part is like getting your funding or whatnot. And I think, it kind of goes back to what I do enjoy about the creative process is when you are limited by a budget, it tends to make you better at thinking creatively. And I think it also allows us to like pick up little things that are smarter on the indie budget scale and to improve them. And also it allows you to build your community. I think this is also a bigger thing that, I want to end the episode kind of highlighting with is you learn, as you were mentioning, you learn distribution, you learn marketing, you learn all of these things. And not only will you make a better movie, but you will also learn how to present the movie better. You'll learn how to gather this community. You'll learn how to work together. And there's so many things that come up past just simple production. So, do you want to kind of talk about how, like, again, filmmaking, people see the movie and I feel like they think it's just you taking your ideas and perfectly making it on screen, which is not how it happens. But there's also so many things that go into it. There is building that community, there is working with distribution, there is marketing, and all of these things, again, you could make the best movie ever, but if you don't market it correctly and if you don't have a community, no one's going to see it. So I think there's a lot of elements to why it's almost, it's the best thing you can do is embrace that these movies are not designed to be your best movie ever. They're designed to be those learning lessons because you are going to learn from each movie that you make incrementally on all elements of filmmaking, not just making the movie.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you an example on the Bigfoot project, there's a found footage movie, so we had a lot of waters, and I think we probably had about 100 setups or 100 different scenes in that movie, just on the hour-and-a-half movie. That's 100 decisions that you have to make, probably more. So you probably have to multiply that by 2 or 3 times because that's camera movements, that's camera setups, that's acting decision, that's acting choices, how you're going to block a scene, color, how you're going to light a scene. All right, so times that by 10, honestly. And so you're looking at just in one movie, you could have thousands of decisions to make. And if you make a couple bad ones, you could very easily mess your movie up, pretty easily. If you have a really bad scene in the middle, people are going to turn your movie off. So to make a very good movie is asking you to have, thousands and thousands of decisions and get them all correct. And that is almost impossible if you've never done this before. I think a first-time filmmaker, if you can get the majority of your decisions to work out, I think you're doing a good job. But it's a very hard task to go through a whole movie and make it perfect. And even, out of all the movies that get released each year, the really, really, really good ones are few and far between. And then to ask the director to continually make really, really, really good movies, there's just not a lot of directors now that are doing that are making really good movies consistently. It's very, very, very difficult, even for the most experienced directors, for the most experienced producers, to continually make very, very good movies. And if Hollywood's not doing it with $100 million in budget, it's going to be very hard for you as an indie filmmaker with a fraction of that budget, with a fraction of the experience, to really tell the story that you want to tell. If you can make the movie, if you can upload it, if you can make another movie, you'll have long-term success in this. You'll be able to get some of your money back, and you'll be able to make another movie. And that's what I see as success. Success to me is, can I make another movie after this one? That's it. And if I could start making another movie, if I could plan another movie, if I could start writing another script, then, I'm a successful filmmaker.
I really think that is the case. Is, again, it's consistency, being able to do the filmmaking. I always say, if you write, you're a writer. If you're making movies, you're a filmmaker. It's the art of doing that process is the important part. So again, all indie filmmakers out there, keep your heads up. This is not to demoralize or keep you guys down in that sense. We just want to set you up for the best understanding of how to progress and how to make more movies. And again, there's a lot of benefits that come from making these movies. And once you cross one out, I think the last thing I really want to mention about is the confidence you gain. We talk about the Hateful Eight in a very endearing way, but one thing that always comes up is, it's never going to be like those. And if we were able to get those complete and have those finished, then that is kind of, another last nugget that you have there. So you want to talk about that is, you get the confidence. Making those 10,000 decisions becomes an easy back of the, just subconscious thing because you've done it before.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. When you kind of look back at the movies that we've made, you gain confidence because you look at what we did well. And you're like, all right, look, we did these shots well. We told this story well. We built lore really well. We did the climax well here. We did the intro well here. And you can build off that. That's, the second time you do something, you're usually that much better at it. But you can also look at the mistakes you made and say, well, we're never going to do that again. Or, if we survive that shoot, I could make any shoot work. And we kind of did that with, Force of Death. It was a very hard shoot. It's a very hard concept. If I could get Force of Death to work, then, moving forward, I'm never going to put myself in that same position again. So that inspired a lot of confidence. And just looking back now, because we're in the process of, about to start pre-production for Girl in Cabin 14, watching Girl in Cabin 13 and seeing what we did well and seeing what, needs to be improved on gives me a lot of confidence. Cause I'm like, all right, I really like this scene. I thought this scene, we did a great job with this. We could do a better job now because now I have a lot more experience. Or, I just didn't like this scene. I feel like we could either pivot in another direction or we could try and, do something different. And it gives me the confidence that, this story is going to be so much better than the original Girl in Cabin 13. But once again, it just comes from making other movies. And that's the name of the game, is to finish a movie, upload it, and then make another movie.
That's exactly it, my friends. And that's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Again, we give our support to each and every indie filmmaker out there, because it is part of the process and we want you guys to be as successful as possible. So be sure to take a look at our Discord channel online. We make movies for our fans with our fans. Also, be sure to take a look at Horror in the Forest. It could be out right now. And if it is, giving us a rental and a review means the world to us. But until then, have a good one, my friends.